The massive alien ship hung in space above Earth like a dark metal moon. Dr. Hyunwoo Park pressed his face against the shuttle window and watched the vessel grow larger as they approached. He had studied biology his whole life, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Real aliens, real first contact. Stop looking so excited, Captain So-Young Kim said from the pilot seat. We don't know if they're friendly yet. Engineer Tae-min Lee checked his tablet for the 100th time. The readings are incredible. Their technology is at least 1,000 years ahead of ours. The shuttle docked with a soft thud. The airlock hissed open, and the three humans stepped into the alien ship. The corridors were enormous, clearly built for beings much larger than humans. Strange lights pulsed along the walls, and the air smelled like copper and ozone. "Welcome, creatures of Earth," a voice boomed from everywhere at once. The walls themselves seemed to speak. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Nethran Empire. You will follow the blue lights to the meeting chamber." The humans walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Other aliens watched them from doorways. These beings were tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. They whispered to each other in languages that sounded like wind, through broken glass. The meeting chamber was massive. A curved table sat in the center, and behind it stood the largest alien they had seen yet. Ambassador Veltar was almost 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that shifted between different shades of gray. 2 smaller aliens flanked him, wearing what looked like ceremonial robes. "Sit," Veltar commanded, pointing to 3 small chairs that had clearly been built just for humans. Dr. Hyunwoo sat down and pulled out his notebook. "This is amazing. We have so many questions about your species, your culture, your—" Silence. Veltar's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You will speak only when permitted. First, you must understand your place in the Galactic Order." The ambassador raised his 4 arms above his head. The air in the room seemed to grow heavy and thick. A strange pressure filled the space, pressing down on everything. The walls began to glow with a sickly purple light. "Behold the power of the Nethran Empire," Veltar said. His voice now seemed to come from inside their heads instead of their ears. "You feel our mental strength crushing your primitive minds. Submit now, and your species may serve us. Resist and face destruction." Dr. Hyunwoo felt something like a mild headache starting behind his eyes. He rubbed his temples and looked around the room. Captain So-Young seemed completely unaffected, checking her watch with a bored expression. Taemin was still taking readings on his tablet. "Is something supposed to be happening?" Captain So-Young asked. "Because I just feel like I need some coffee." The purple light flickered. Veltar's 4 eyes widened in what might have been surprise. You feel nothing?" the ambassador asked. "Well, I have a small headache," Dr. Hyunwoo said honestly, "but I get those a lot when I'm stressed. Do you have any aspirin?" The 2 smaller aliens began speaking rapidly to each other in their wind-glass language. Veltar held up a hand for silence. "Perhaps you did not understand," the ambassador said slowly. "We are using our most powerful mental dominance techniques. Every species in the galaxy falls to their knees when we do this. You should be begging for mercy." Taemin looked up from his tablet. "Oh, is that what the purple light was for? That's actually pretty cool. How does it work?" "Some kind of electromagnetic field that affects brain chemistry?" Captain So-Young stood up and stretched. "Look, this is all very interesting, but we came here to talk about peaceful contact between our species. If you're trying to hypnotize us or something, it's not working. Can we just skip to the actual negotiations?" Veltar stared at them for a long moment. The purple light faded completely, and the pressure in the room disappeared. The ambassador slowly lowered his 4 arms. "This is unprecedented," he said quietly. "No species has ever resisted the submission protocol. Not one." "Submission protocol?" Dr. Hyunwoo asked, still rubbing his temples. That sounds kind of rude. We prefer cooperative protocols. You know, where everyone works together? One of the smaller aliens leaned over and whispered something urgent to Veltar. The ambassador nodded slowly. Perhaps, Veltar said carefully, we should try a different approach. Tell us about your species. How did you achieve resistance to mental domination? Mental domination? Captain So-Young laughed. We don't have anything like that on Earth. I mean, people try to influence each other all the time, but you can't really control someone else's mind. Everyone thinks differently. Impossible, Veltar said. If you have no mental defenses, our power should have worked instantly. Taemin looked confused. Maybe it's because we're used to stress? I mean, life on Earth is pretty tough. We deal with pressure all the time. Natural disasters, wars, economic problems, personal struggles. Maybe what seems overwhelming to you just feels normal to us? The alien ambassador stared at the three humans as if they had just said something impossible. He spoke again to his assistants in the wind-glass language. Their conversation grew more and more urgent. You live with constant stress and pressure? Veltar asked finally. Well, yeah, Dr. Hyunwoo said. I mean, not constant, but it comes and goes. You learn to deal with it. Everyone does. And you function normally under this pressure? Sure, Captain So-Young said. Some people actually do their best work under pressure. I know I do. Combat. Situations, emergency rescues, impossible deadlines. That's when you really find out what you're made of. Veltar sat down heavily in his chair. For a being that had seemed so confident and powerful moments before, he now looked confused and worried. We need to contact the Galactic Council immediately, he said to his assistants. This changes everything. Did we do something wrong? Dr. Hyunwoo asked. We're really just here to make friends and learn about the galaxy. Wrong? Veltar repeated slowly. No, humans of Earth. You have done nothing wrong, but you have done something that should be impossible. You have remained yourselves in the face of absolute domination. In 30,000 years of galactic expansion, no species has ever done this. The ambassador stood up again, but this time he seemed smaller somehow, less threatening. We will need to study this phenomenon, he said. With your permission, of course. The Galactic Council will want to understand how your species developed this immunity. Study away, Taemin said cheerfully. We'd love to learn about your technology too. Maybe we can help each other. As the humans were led to guest quarters on the ship, none of them realized they had just broken a fundamental rule of galactic civilization. They had no idea that their simple ability to shrug off mental pressure was about to change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. They just thought they were having an interesting day at work. 3 days later, more humans arrived on the alien ship. The news of first contact had spread across Earth like wildfire, and every government wanted representatives present. Ji-Hoon Choi came as a philosopher, Dr. Min-seo Han as a psychologist, and Ambassador Dae-Hyun Kang as Earth's official diplomatic representative. Ambassador Veltar watched the new arrivals with growing concern. His superiors in the Galactic Council had not believed his reports about human resistance to mental domination. They demanded proof. Perhaps the first three were mutants, Veltar's assistant, Sub-Commander Kexton, suggested. These new ones will surely submit to proper pressure. The humans gathered in the same meeting chamber. Dr. Han Wu introduced the newcomers to Veltar and explained what had happened during their first meeting. So they tried to control your minds and it didn't work? Ji-Hoon asked with interest. Fascinating. From a philosophical standpoint, the very concept of mental domination raises questions about free will and consciousness. From a psychological perspective, Dr. Min-seo added, it sounds like they're using some form of induced anxiety or fear response. But humans have developed remarkable coping mechanisms for stress over thousands of years. Ambassador Dae-Hyun straightened his tie. Well, I'm here to establish formal diplomatic relations. Shall we begin negotiations? Veltar exchanged glances with his assistants. First, we must conduct the same tests we performed on your colleagues. The alien ambassador raised his forearms again. The purple light filled the room, stronger this time. The pressure was intense enough to make the metal walls groan. Veltar poured all his mental energy into the dominance display. Ji-hoon felt the pressure and found it mildly interesting. "Oh, this is what you meant," he said to Dr. Hyun-woo. "It does feel like a headache, but also kind of like that feeling you get before a big test or job interview." Dr. Minseo was taking notes even as the mental assault continued. The physiological response is similar to acute stress, but without the emotional component. It's like my brain is recognizing it as artificial pressure. Ambassador Dae-hyun looked annoyed. "Are we going to do this every time? Because I have a schedule to keep. Can we move on to actual diplomacy?" The purple light died. Veltar staggered, backward, exhausted from the effort. His assistants caught him before he could fall. "Impossible," Sub-Commander Kexton whispered. "The ambassador used enough power to subdue an entire city." "Call for the Kithek overlords," Veltar gasped. "If the humans can resist me, perhaps they cannot resist the true masters of mental warfare." 2 hours later, 3 of the most feared beings in the galaxy materialized in the chamber. The Kithek overlords were creatures of pure mental energy, barely contained in mechanical bodies. Their arrival made the air itself feel dangerous. The humans looked up with interest as the newcomers appeared. "Oh, wow," Taemin said, still present from the first group. "How does that work? Are they energy beings using artificial bodies? That's incredible engineering." The lead overlord spoke without moving. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "Mortals, you will kneel before the infinite power of the Kithek. Your minds will be torn apart and rebuilt in our image." The chamber filled with a darkness that seemed to eat light itself. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist as the overlords unleashed their full psychic might. This was power that had broken entire civilizations. Captain So Young felt something like a really bad migraine starting. "Ugh, this is worse than the last one. Do you guys have anything stronger than aspirin? Maybe some ibuprofen?" Dr. Minseo was still taking notes, though she had to squint through the artificial darkness. "Interesting. The sensory distortion is impressive, but the underlying effect is still just stress induction. It's like they're trying to simulate the feeling of being in mortal danger." "The darkness is pretty cool, though," Ji-hoon added. "It reminds me of a meditation technique where you empty your mind of all external input. Very zen." The Kithek overlords. Assault intensified. They poured thousands of years of accumulated mental power into breaking the humans. The ship's hull began to crack from the psychic pressure. Ambassador Dae-hyun checked his watch. "How much longer is this going to take? I have a call with the UN Security Council in an hour." The darkness suddenly vanished. The overlords mechanical. Bodies were shaking with effort and confusion. "What? What are you?" the lead overlord asked, in a voice filled with something that might have been fear. "We're humans," Dr. Hyun-woo said helpfully. "From Earth. We're a relatively young species, but we're very adaptable." "You should be destroyed," another overlord said. "Your minds should be shattered fragments by now." "Well, we're fine," Captain So Young said, rubbing her temples. "Though I could really use some coffee. This whole experience is giving me a headache." The overlords turned to Veltar. "How is this possible? We have never encountered resistance like this." "I don't know," the ambassador admitted. "They claim it feels like normal stress to them." "Normal stress?" The lead overlord's mechanical voice cracked with disbelief. "We just subjected them to the combined mental power of 3 Kithek masters. That energy could have conquered an entire star system." Dr. Min Seo looked up from her notes. "Oh, is that all? You know, humans deal with psychological pressure all the time. Financial stress, relationship problems, work deadlines, health scares. We've gotten pretty good at managing it. You voluntarily experience mental pressure? An overlord asked. Not voluntarily exactly, Ji-hoon said, but life throws challenges at you whether you want them or not. You either learn to cope or you break down. Most of us learn to cope. Some of us even seek out stressful situations, Captain So-young added. Extreme sports, competitive careers, challenging hobbies, a little pressure can be fun. The overlords looked at each other through their mechanical faces. For beings of pure mental energy, they seemed completely lost. We must report this to the High Council immediately, the lead overlord said. This changes the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. As the overlords vanished and Veltar slumped in his chair, the humans continued their casual conversation about Earth customs and culture. None of them realized they had just humiliated the most powerful psychic beings in known space. They thought they were just having an interesting cultural exchange. Ambassador Dae-hyun pulled out his phone to check messages. So, about those formal negotiations. Chief Scientist Morden arrived on the ship with equipment that filled 3 cargo bays. As the Galactic Council's leading expert on xenobiology and mental sciences, he had been ordered to solve the human mystery at any cost. This is impossible, Morden muttered as he reviewed the reports. Mental resistance simply does not exist in nature. Every sapient species can be dominated through proper psychic pressure. 2 new human volunteers had come aboard to help with the research. Young-ho Shin was a researcher who specialized in human behavior, and Dr. Yoon-ji-yoon was a linguist who wanted to study alien languages. Both had volunteered eagerly when they heard about the scientific exchange program. "We're happy to help," Young-ho said as Morden attached sensors to his head. "This is the discovery of the century. Maybe we can learn something useful for both our species." Dr. Yoon-ji was already working with the ship's translation systems. "Your language is fascinating. The mathematical precision combined with emotional undertone suggests a very different brain structure than humans have." Morden began his tests. First, he scanned the humans' brains while they were relaxed. The readings showed normal neural activity for their species type. Nothing unusual. "Beginning stress test 1, the scientist announced. He activated a device that projected feelings of overwhelming fear directly into their minds. Young-ho blinked a few times. "Oh, that feels like anxiety. Kind of like the feeling you get before a big presentation at work." "Interesting," Dr. Yoon-ji said. "It triggered a brief fight-or-flight response, but my brain seems to be categorizing it as artificial, somehow. Like watching a scary movie. You know it's not real." Morden checked his readings. The device was working perfectly. It should have sent both humans into complete panic. Instead, their brain waves showed only mild alertness. "Test 2, he announced, activating a machine that induced crushing despair. This device had made enemy soldiers surrender rather than face another moment of its influence. "Ugh, that's unpleasant," Young-ho said. "Feels like Monday morning or getting bad news, but it's clearly artificial. My brain knows the difference between real problems and fake ones." Dr. Yoon-ji nodded. "It's like emotional spam. My mind just filters it out automatically." Morden ran 17 more tests. Each one failed completely. The humans experienced the sensations, but remained functionally unaffected. They continued talking and joking throughout procedures that should have left them catatonic. "How is this possible?" Morden asked Dr. Hyun-woo, who was observing the tests. "I'm not sure," the biologist replied. "But humans have always been good at adapting to difficult situations. We evolved on a pretty hostile planet." "Hostile how?" Dr. Hyun-woo pulled up pictures on his tablet. "Well, we have ice ages every few thousand years, massive volcanic eruptions. Earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, diseases that kill millions, predators that hunt us, food shortages, droughts and floods." Morden stared at the images of natural disasters and extinct predator species. "Your planet tried to kill you regularly?" Still does, Captain So Young said cheerfully. Just last year, we had 3 major hurricanes, 2 earthquakes that leveled cities, and a volcanic eruption that grounded flights for weeks. That's pretty normal. And you adapted to this? Had to, Dr. Hyunwoo said. Species that couldn't handle stress went extinct. The ones that survived learned to cope with pressure, uncertainty, and constant change. Morden made rapid notes. So your species evolved under conditions of permanent stress? Not permanent, Young-ho corrected. Intermittent but unpredictable. Sometimes things were fine for years. Then suddenly everything would go wrong at once. You never knew when disaster might strike. That's actually worse, Dr. Yoonji added. Constant stress you can adapt to. Random stress keeps you always ready for anything. The alien scientist's 3 eyes widened as he began to understand. Your species developed mental resilience as a survival trait? I guess so, Dr. Hyunwoo said. Though we never thought of it that way. We just call it dealing with life. Morden continued his research for 3 more days. He brought in specialists from across the galaxy. Every test confirmed the same impossible result. Humans were completely immune to mental domination because their brains were already conditioned to handle extreme stress. Show me your planet's history, Morden requested finally. Young-ho and Dr. Yoonji compiled a basic timeline of human civilization. As Morden read through it, his face grew more and more horrified. You had a plague that killed 1/3 of your population? The Black Death. We had several major plagues, actually. And wars that lasted decades? Some lasted over 100 years. Natural disasters that destroyed entire civilizations. Mount Vesuvius, the eruption of Krakatoa, the Lisbon earthquake, that's just the ones we remember. And during these disasters, your species continued to function, to create art and literature? Dr. Yoonji nodded. Some of our greatest works were created during the worst times. Bach wrote his best music during a period of personal tragedy. Dickens wrote about poverty while living in it. We have entire art movements that grew out of war and suffering. Morden put down the tablet with shaking hands. Your species doesn't just survive trauma. You use it as inspiration. Well, when bad things happen, you have 2 choices, Young-ho said. You can let them destroy you, or you can learn from them and grow stronger. Most humans choose to grow stronger. The scientist looked around at all the humans present. They were chatting casually, sharing snacks, teaching each other words in different languages. They showed no signs of stress, despite being surrounded by alien technology and beings that could kill them instantly. You have no idea how extraordinary you are, Morden said quietly. Extraordinary how? Dr. Hyunwoo asked. Every other species in the galaxy evolved on worlds that supported them. Pleasant climates, abundant food, few predators. When they developed space travel, they conquered other species through mental domination because no one had ever learned to resist psychological pressure. That sounds kind of terrible, Captain So Young said. Why would you want to control other people instead of working with them? Because it's easier. And because we could. Until now. Morden made his final report to the Galactic Council that night. The conclusion was simple but shocking. Humans were not just immune to mental domination. They were immune because they had evolved a completely different approach to consciousness itself. Where other species sought comfort and control, humans had learned to find strength in struggle and opportunity in adversity, and none of them realized how terrifying that made them to the rest of the galaxy. Scholar In-ho Jang arrived on the ship carrying a small library of human history books. As Earth's leading historian, he had been invited to share human culture with the alien academics who were desperate to understand what made humans so different. The alien scholars gathered in the ship's research bay. Representatives from 12 different species sat around tables that had been hastily adjusted for different body types. Morden introduced the human to his colleagues. "This is Scholar In-Ho Jang," the chief scientist said. "He will explain how human civilization developed under the conditions we discovered." In-Ho set up his presentation screen and smiled at his audience. "Thank you for having me. I understand you want to learn about human history. Where should I start?" "Tell us about your species' greatest disaster," requested Dr. Zealmoth, a reptilian academic from the Helix Confederation. "We want to understand how you survived." "Oh, that's hard to choose," In-Ho said thoughtfully. "We've had so many. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs happened before humans existed, so I guess that doesn't count. Maybe the Toba supervolcano eruption? That nearly made us extinct about 70,000 years ago." The assembled scholars made notes. One disaster that nearly caused extinction seemed manageable. "Or maybe the ice ages," In-Ho continued. "We had several of those. Massive sheets of ice covering half the planet for thousands of years at a time. Our ancestors had to develop new tools and survival strategies for each one. The note-taking became more frantic. Then there were the plagues. The Black Death killed about 60% of Europe's population in just 4 years. Smallpox wiped out 90% of the native populations in the Americas. The 1918 flu pandemic killed 50 million people worldwide. Several alien scholars had stopped writing and were just staring. Of course, we also had wars," In-Ho said, advancing to his next slide. "The Mongol conquest killed about 40 million people. World War I killed 17 million. World War II killed about 75 million. The Taiping Rebellion, the Napoleonic Wars, the Crusades." Dr. Zealmoth held up a clawed hand. "Wait, you're describing multiple extinction-level events. How did your civilization survive even one of these?" "Oh, we adapted," In-Ho said cheerfully. "Each disaster taught us new ways to organize society, develop technology, and take care of each other. The Black Death led to better understanding of disease and major social reforms. The World Wars accelerated technological development by decades. You learned from genocide and plague?" asked Professor Welkaran, a floating gas entity from the Ethereal Collective. "Well, we had to. The alternative was dying out completely." In-Ho clicked to a new slide showing a timeline of human achievements. "Look at what we accomplished during our worst periods. The Renaissance happened right after the Black Death. Some of our greatest art and literature came out of wars and social upheaval." He showed them paintings created during famines, music composed in concentration camps, poetry written in bombed-out cities. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Nextara, an insectoid scholar from the hive worlds. "Trauma destroys creativity. Suffering breaks the mind." "Not for humans," In-Ho said. "We seem to do our best work when things are worst. We call it rising to the occasion, or finding strength in adversity." Morden leaned forward. "Show them the population graphs." In-Ho pulled up a chart showing human population over time. "This is interesting. See these dips? Each one represents a major disaster: plague, war, famine, natural catastrophe. But look what happens after each dip." The chart showed something that made the alien scholars gasp. After every population crash, humans had bounced back stronger than before. The line didn't just recover, it exceeded previous levels within a few generations. "You use disasters as opportunities for growth?" Dr. Zealmoth asked in disbelief. "Not intentionally," In-Ho admitted. "But disasters forced us to innovate. When the old ways didn't work anymore, we had to invent new ones. Often the new ways were better than what we had before." Professor Welkaran's gaseous form was shimmering with agitation. "This violates every principle of psychology and sociology. Civilizations are supposed to avoid trauma, not embrace it." "We don't embrace it exactly," In-Ho said. "We just don't let it stop us. When bad things happen, we mourn for a while, then we figure out how to prevent them from happening again. And usually, we make ourselves stronger in the process." Dr. Nextara was clicking her mandibles nervously. "But the mental damage, the psychological scarring, how do you function with so much accumulated trauma?" "Well, We have therapy and counseling to help people process difficult experiences. But mostly, we tell stories. Stories? Inho nodded. Humans are storytelling creatures. We turn our traumas into narratives. We write books about wars, make movies about disasters, sing songs about heartbreak. By turning suffering into stories, we transform it from something that destroys us into something that teaches us. The alien scholars looked at each other with growing alarm. This was not how civilized species were supposed to behave. Show them the cultural works, Morden requested quietly. Inho spent the next hour displaying human art, literature, and music. Every piece had been created in response to some form of suffering or challenge. The aliens watched in growing horror as they realized that human culture was essentially a collection of lessons learned from trauma. You turn pain into beauty, Dr. Zealmoth said finally. I guess we do. Inho agreed. Is that unusual? The alien scholars exchanged glances. Their own species had spent thousands of years trying to eliminate all sources of stress and suffering. They had created perfect societies where nothing bad ever happened. What happens to your people who cannot adapt to trauma? Professor Welkaran asked. We help them, Inho said simply. We have social systems, medical care, support networks. We've learned that everyone processes difficult experiences differently, so we try to provide different types of help. And if someone still cannot cope, then we keep trying. We don't give up on people just because they're struggling. This was the final revelation that terrified the alien academics. Not only did humans thrive under pressure, they also refused to abandon those who couldn't. They had built entire civilizations around the principle of helping each other through difficult times. Dr. Nexatara spoke for all of them. Your species weaponized suffering. You turned the worst possible experiences into tools for growth and connection. I wouldn't call it weaponizing, Inho said. We just learned to work with what we had. Life is difficult, so we got good at dealing with difficulty. As the presentation ended and the scholars filed out in stunned silence, none of them noticed the most disturbing detail of all. Inho Zhang had just spent hours describing the worst disasters in human history, and he had smiled through the entire presentation. For humans, even the discussion of trauma was just another opportunity to connect with others and share knowledge. The alien scholars would spend the next several days trying to understand how a species could be so fundamentally different from everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. The cultural exchange program began with high hopes from the humans and deep anxiety from the aliens. 2 new arrivals from Earth had joined the group, Jae-sung Park, a musician, and Bo-ram Choi, an artist. They had come to share human creative traditions with their alien hosts. We thought you might enjoy some of our music and art, Jae-sung said, setting up his guitar in the ship's main meeting room. Music is how humans express emotions and connect with each other. The alien audience included representatives from 6 different species, all trying to understand what made humans so psychologically resilient. They expected to see primitive art forms from a warrior culture. This song was written during our Civil War, Jae-sung explained, tuning his guitar. A time when our country was divided and families were fighting each other. The songwriter was a soldier who missed his home. He began to play. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, full of longing and sadness, but also hope. As he sang the lyrics about missing loved ones and dreaming of peace, several of the aliens found themselves moved despite not understanding the words. The song is called When Johnny Comes Marching Home, Jae-sung said when he finished. It helped people cope with separation and loss during one of our most difficult periods. Dr. Zealmoth looked confused. You created beauty from warfare? We create beauty from everything, Bo-ram said, unveiling her first painting. This is a self-portrait painted by an artist in a refugee camp. She had lost everything but still found a way to create. The painting showed a woman's face, weathered by hardship but with eyes full of determination. The brush strokes were bold and confident despite being painted with limited supplies. She painted this with mud and berry juice, Bo-Ram continued. When you don't have proper materials, you improvise. The alien audience stared at the painting, in silence. The idea of creating art under such conditions was incomprehensible to them. Show them the problem-solving example, Mordun suggested quietly. Engineer Tae-Min Lee stepped forward with a tablet displaying technical schematics. Actually, that reminds me. I've been looking at your ship's systems and I noticed something interesting. He pulled up a diagram of the alien power distribution network. You've got an efficiency problem here. The energy conduits are arranged in a perfect grid pattern, which looks organized but creates unnecessary resistance at junction points. Chief Engineer Voxtel, a mechanical being from the Automation Collective, examined the display. This grid system has been standard for over 2,000 years. It ensures equal distribution to all systems. Right. But equal doesn't always mean optimal, Tae-Min said, sketching rapidly on the tablet. What if you rerouted the main conduits like this, following the ship's natural stress lines instead of fighting them? The new design looked chaotic, compared to the orderly grid, but the mathematical projections showed a 30% improvement in efficiency. Impossible, Voxtel said. We have run millions of simulations. The grid system is optimal. It's optimal if you assume the ship is a perfect geometric shape operating under ideal conditions. Tae-Min agreed. But ships aren't perfect, and space isn't ideal. You have to account for real-world variables. He pulled up another screen showing stress analysis data. See, your ship flexes slightly under acceleration. The grid system doesn't account for that flex, so it fights against the ship's natural movement. My design works with the flex instead of against it. The alien engineers gathered around the display, arguing among themselves in multiple languages. The humans' solution violated every principle of their engineering philosophy, but the mathematics were undeniable. How did you conceive of this approach? Asked Assistant Engineer Nelvara, a crystalline being whose thoughts moved through light patterns. Well, I was thinking about how trees grow, Tae-Min said. They don't follow straight lines. They grow around obstacles, bend in wind, adapt to their environment. The strongest trees are the ones that can flex without breaking. The aliens stared at him. Using biological systems as engineering models was another concept that had never occurred to them. On Earth, we call it biomimicry, Dr. Hyun-Woo added. When we can't solve a problem with conventional thinking, we look at how nature handles similar challenges. But nature is chaotic and inefficient, Voxtel protested. Nature is tested by reality, Captain So-Young corrected. If a natural system doesn't work, it dies. Only the solutions that actually function survive long enough for us to study them. Dr. Minseo was watching the alien reactions with professional interest. I think we're seeing a fundamental difference in problem-solving approaches. Your species seem to value order, predictability, and control. Humans value adaptability, creativity, and resilience. Is that why you're immune to mental domination? Asked Dr. Zale-Moth. Partly, Dr. Minseo said. Our brains are wired to look for alternatives when the obvious solution doesn't work. When you try to dominate us mentally, our minds automatically start looking for ways around the pressure instead of just submitting to it. Scholar Inho nodded. It's the same pattern throughout human history. When faced with an impossible situation, we don't accept that it's impossible. We assume there's a solution we haven't thought of yet. Even when there isn't a solution? Professor Welkaran asked. Especially then, Jae-Sung said with a smile. That's when we get really creative. Bo-Ram unveiled her final painting, an abstract piece full of swirling colors and dynamic energy. This represents the human approach to life. We don't try to control chaos. We dance with it. The alien academics spent hours discussing what they had witnessed. The humans hadn't just shown them art and music, they had demonstrated a completely different way of thinking about problems. They don't see obstacles as barriers, Dr. Zale-Moth observed. They see them as puzzles to solve, and they don't fear failure, added Dr. Nextara. They treat it as information. Mordun was recording everything. This is the key. The skill that makes them immune to our dominance techniques. They don't think in terms of submission or control. They think in terms of adaptation and growth. But how did they develop this? Voxtel asked. By living on a planet that constantly challenged them, Captain So Young said. She had overheard their conversation. Every time we thought we had life figured out, something changed. Ice age, earthquake, plague, war. We learned that the only constant is change itself. So you learn to love change instead of fear it, Professor Welkaran said slowly. Love might be too strong a word, Dr. Hyunwoo said, but we definitely learned to work with it instead of against it. As the cultural exchange continued, the aliens began to realize they weren't just witnessing human art and engineering. They were seeing evidence of a species that had evolved an entirely different relationship with reality itself, and none of the humans seemed to realize how revolutionary their way of thinking actually was. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the massive chamber that orbited the galaxy's center. Representatives from every major civilization gathered in growing panic as reports poured in from across known space. Ambassador Veltar stood before the assembly, his four arms trembling as he delivered his report. Honored council members, I must inform you that our standard conquest protocols have failed completely against the species known as humans. High Counselor Thexmeron, an ancient being whose species had founded the council 50,000 years ago, leaned forward on his crystalline throne. Explain this failure, Ambassador. The humans are immune to mental domination, Veltar said. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Every technique we tried, from basic pressure to the combined might of 3 Kithek overlords, proved ineffective. Impossible, declared General Zorthak of the militaristic Zorvan Empire. Our psychological warfare has subjugated over 300 species. No sentient life form can resist proper mental pressure. The humans did more than resist, Veltar continued. They remained completely functional. They treated our most powerful attacks as minor inconveniences. Technical advisor Helix Prime, a mechanical representative of the technology-focused Helix Confederation, activated his data displays. We have confirmed similar reports from 17 other contact points. Human ships have now visited 43 of our worlds, and the pattern remains consistent. The displays showed footage from multiple planets. In each case, human delegations remained unaffected by intimidation techniques that should have left them begging for mercy. On Helix 7, human engineers reviewed our manufacturing systems and suggested improvements that increased efficiency by 40%, Helix Prime reported. On Zorvan Prime, human philosophers engaged our warrior priests in debates about the nature of strength and completely confused them. Confused how? General Zorthak demanded. The humans suggested that true strength comes from adapting to challenges rather than dominating them. Our priests found this concept so alien they requested additional discussions to understand it. High Counselor Thex Miran's ancient mind struggled to process this information. Are you telling me that not only are humans immune to conquest, but they are converting our people to their way of thinking? Dr. Minseo Han stepped forward from the human delegation that had been permitted to observe the session. May I address the council? The chamber fell silent. Never before had a member of an unconquered species been allowed to speak during council proceedings. The confusion seems to stem from a misunderstanding about human psychology, Dr. Minseo said calmly. You're trying to apply conquest models to a species that doesn't think in terms of dominance and submission. Then how do you think? Asked Counselor Etherwind of the psychically gifted Atherny. In terms of cooperation and mutual benefit, Dr. Minseo replied. When we encounter problems, our first instinct is to work together to solve them. When we meet new people, we look for ways to help each other. Ambassador Dai Hyun Kang joined her. We understand that this approach is unusual in galactic civilization, But we've found that collaboration produces better results than domination in most situations. General Zorthak stood up, his massive form bristling with warrior implants. Your species will learn to submit. We will demonstrate the price of resistance. With respect, General, Captain So Young Kim said, we're not resisting anything. We're just being ourselves. If being ourselves makes you uncomfortable, maybe the problem isn't with us. The simple statement hit the chamber like a physical blow. The entire galactic order was based on the idea that strength meant the ability to dominate others. The humans were suggesting that this fundamental assumption might be wrong. Furthermore, Dr. Hyun-woo added, we've been studying your various species during our visits. We're concerned about the psychological health of your civilizations. Concerned how? High Counselor Thex Mirren asked sharply. You've all eliminated stress and challenge from your societies, Young Ho Shin explained. From a human psychological perspective, that's deeply unhealthy. Growth requires challenge. Learning requires failure. Innovation requires problems to solve. Our civilizations are perfect, declared Counselor Serenity Blue of the Peaceful, Tranquil Collective. We have eliminated war, disease, poverty, and suffering. But you've also eliminated growth, creativity, and resilience, Dr. Min Seo pointed out. Your people are psychologically fragile because they've never learned to cope with adversity. The chamber erupted in angry protests, but High Counselor Thex Mirren raised a hand for silence. These are serious accusations, the ancient being said. What evidence do you have? Engineer Taemin Lee activated his own display. We've analyzed the technological development of galactic civilizations over the past 10,000 years. Innovation has essentially stopped. All your major advances happened during your species' early, more chaotic periods. The data was undeniable. Galactic civilization had achieved stability by eliminating the very conditions that drove progress. You conquered the galaxy, Scholar In-Ho Jang said, but then you stopped growing. You've been stagnant for millennia. We achieved perfection, General Zorthak protested. You achieved stagnation, Captain So Young corrected. And stagnation is death, just spread out over a longer time period. Counselor Etherwind's ethereal form shimmered with distress. But suffering is evil. Chaos is destructive. Order and peace are the highest goals of civilization. Some suffering is evil, Dr. Min Seo agreed. But some challenge is necessary for health. The key is learning to tell the difference. And learning to help each other through difficult times, Ambassador Dae-hyun added. Humans don't glorify suffering. We just don't let it destroy us. High Counselor Thex Mirren was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 50,000 years of experience. You are suggesting that our entire model of civilization is flawed. We're suggesting that it's incomplete, Dr. Hyun-woo said gently. You've mastered one half of the equation, how to eliminate problems, but you never learned the other half, how to grow from problems that can't be eliminated. The galaxy is changing whether you're ready or not, Captain So Young added. New challenges are coming from outside our local group. You can either learn to adapt or you can stagnate until something stronger replaces you. The council chamber fell into stunned silence. For the first time in galactic history, an unconquered species was offering to teach their conquerors instead of begging for mercy. What do you propose? High Counselor Thex Mirren asked finally. Cultural exchange, Ambassador Dae-hyun said simply. We'll share what we know about resilience and adaptation. You can share your knowledge about creating stable societies. Maybe, together we can build something better than either of us could achieve alone. And if we refuse? Captain So Young shrugged. Then you refuse. We're not going to force you to learn from us. That would make us just like the old galactic system. The most powerful beings in the galaxy stared at the small group of humans who had just offered to revolutionize everything they thought they knew about civilization. And they realized that for the first time in 50,000 years, they had no idea what to do next. 3 months after the council session, Reports began flowing in from across the galaxy that disturbed the old order more than any military defeat ever could. On Helix 7, young engineer Prime Delta had spent weeks studying the human modifications to their manufacturing systems. The improvements worked so well that other engineers began asking how the humans had thought of solutions that had eluded them for centuries. They call it thinking outside the box, Prime Delta explained to a gathering of his colleagues. Instead of accepting that our current methods are optimal, they questioned every assumption. But questioning assumptions leads to chaos, protested Senior Engineer Omega 6. Does it? Prime Delta pulled up the efficiency reports. Our production increased 40%. Our error rate dropped by 60%. Our workers report higher. Satisfaction, because they're solving problems instead of just following routines. On the Zorvan homeworld, young warrior philosopher Kexnor was having similar discussions with his battle brothers. His conversations with the human delegation had left him confused about the nature of strength. The humans defeated our psychological attacks without fighting back, he told his squad. They didn't resist our power, they simply weren't affected by it. Impossible, growled battle leader Gorthak. Power is absolute. The strong dominate. The weak. But what if there are different kinds of strength? Kexnor asked. The humans are strong in ways we never considered. They're strong enough to help their enemies, strong enough to admit when they're wrong, strong enough to change when change is needed. His squad mates looked at him as if he had spoken blasphemy, but some of the younger warriors nodded thoughtfully. In the serene gardens of the Tranquil Collective, Harmony Singer 3 had been struggling with concepts the human Dr. Minseo had introduced during her visit. She said that avoiding all stress makes us fragile, Harmony Singer 3 told her meditation circle. That we need small challenges to stay healthy, like exercise for the mind. Stress is the enemy of peace, replied Serenity Keeper 9. But is it? Harmony Singer 3 had been experimenting with what the humans called beneficial stress. She had started taking on harder tasks, accepting minor inconveniences, even allowing herself to feel frustrated occasionally. I've been more creative in the past month than in the previous decade. That's disturbing, Serenity Keeper 9 said. It's exhilarating, Harmony Singer 3 corrected. These conversations were happening on hundreds of worlds. Young beings from dozens of species were beginning to question the fundamental principles their civilizations were built on. High Counselor. Thexmiran called another emergency session as reports of the spreading influence reached the council chambers. This is a crisis beyond any military threat we've ever faced, he announced to the assembled representatives. The humans are not conquering our people. They're converting them to a completely different way of thinking. General Zorthak was furious. My warriors are questioning the value of strength through domination. They're asking if there might be better ways to be strong. It's undermining everything our civilization stands for. My engineers are redesigning systems that have worked perfectly for thousands of years, added technical advisor Helix Prime. They claim they're optimizing for resilience instead of efficiency. Half of them want to visit Earth to study human engineering philosophy. And my people are deliberately introducing stress into their lives, reported Counselor Serenity Blue with horror. They call it growth challenges and claim it makes them feel more alive. Ambassador Veltar, who had started this crisis by first encountering the humans, stood to address the council. I have been studying the human delegation for months, he said. I believe I understand what's happening. The humans aren't trying to convert our people, they're just being themselves. But their way of existing is so fundamentally different from ours that exposure to it changes how our people think about reality. Explain, High Counselor Thexmiran demanded. Humans assume that growth is possible, that problems have solutions, and that cooperation produces better results than domination. When our people interact with beings who think this way, they begin to wonder if these assumptions might be correct. Dr. Yoonji Yoon, observing from the human section, requested permission to speak. Honored counselors, we're seeing the same thing, happening to humans who interact with your people. Our engineers are fascinated by your precision and efficiency. Our philosophers are intrigued by your social harmony. Our artists are inspired by your aesthetic traditions. But we're not changing, General Zorthak protested. Actually, you are, Dr. Mincio said gently. You're just changing more slowly, because you're not used to adapting quickly. But some of your people are definitely embracing new ideas. Scholar In-Ho Jang pulled up communication logs. We've received over 10,000 requests from young beings across the galaxy who want to visit Earth and study human culture. They want to learn what they call adaptive thinking and resilience training. The council chamber buzzed with alarm. This was not conquest. It was something far more dangerous. It was voluntary transformation. What do you want from us? High Counselor Thex Miran asked the humans directly. Nothing, Ambassador Daehyun Kang replied. We don't want to change. Your civilizations, we just want to be friends and learn from each other. But your mere presence is changing us. Change was already coming, Captain So Young said. The galaxy has been stagnant for thousands of years. Either you learn to grow again, or eventually something will come along that's stronger than your current systems. We could isolate ourselves, suggested Counselor Etherwind. Prohibit contact with humans. You could try, Dr. Hyunwoo agreed. But your young people are already asking questions you can't answer. Questions like, why do we do things this way? And what if there's a better approach? Those are dangerous questions, General Zorthak growled. Those are the only questions worth asking, Engineer Tae Min replied. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The old galactic order was already changing. The question wasn't whether to allow human influence. It was whether to guide that influence or let it develop chaotically. We need time to consider our options, High Counselor Thex Miran announced. Finally. Of course, Ambassador Daehyun said. Take all the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready to talk. As the council session ended, young beings across the galaxy were making their own decisions. They were seeking out human teachers, studying Earth history, and experimenting with concepts like creative stress and adaptive thinking. The revolution had begun, and it wasn't happening in the council chambers or military command centers. It was happening in laboratories and workshops, meditation gardens and warrior training grounds, wherever young minds encountered the radical idea that growth might be more valuable than security. And the humans, still unaware of the magnitude of what they had triggered, continued to simply be themselves, helpful, curious, and always looking for ways to turn challenges into opportunities. 1 year after first contact, the unthinkable happened. High Counselor Thex Miran, ruler of the galaxy for over 10,000 years, knelt before the human delegation in the council chambers. We formally request, the ancient being said, his crystalline form bowing low, that humanity accept the role of cultural advisors to the Galactic Council. The humans looked at each other in confusion. Captain So Young Kim was the first to speak. We appreciate the offer, but we don't really know how to rule a galaxy. We're still figuring out how to run our own planet. That's exactly why we need you, replied General Zorthak, who had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all. We've spent 50,000 years believing that strength meant control. You've shown us that real strength means adapting to whatever life throws at you. Ambassador Daehyun Kang looked around the chamber where representatives from hundreds of species were all watching the humans expectantly. What exactly are you asking us to do? Teach us, said Technical Advisor Helix Prime. Teach us how to think like humans, how to find opportunity in crisis, how to grow stronger through adversity. Engineer Prime Delta, the young Helix engineer who had been one of the first converts to human thinking, stepped forward with a presentation. Human-inspired modifications have improved efficiency across our manufacturing networks by an average of 37%, he reported. But more importantly, our engineers report feeling engaged and creative for the first time in centuries. Warrior philosopher Kexnor presented similar data from the Zorvan military. Human concepts of strength through adaptability have revolutionized our training programs. Our warriors are more effective in combat, but they're also better at preventing conflicts through creative diplomacy. And our artists are creating works unlike anything we've produced in millennia, added Harmony Singer 3 from the Tranquil Collective. By allowing ourselves to experience controlled stress and challenge, we've rediscovered inspiration. Dr. Minseo Han was taking notes furiously. This is fascinating from a psychological perspective. You're describing civilization-wide post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth? Asked Counselor Etherwind. It's when individuals or groups become stronger and more capable after experiencing and processing difficult challenges, Dr. Minseo explained. Humans do it naturally, but apparently, other species can learn it too. Scholar Inho Jiang was reviewing historical data on his tablet. The pattern is consistent across all the species that have adopted human-influenced practices. Technological innovation is accelerating, social satisfaction is increasing, even conflict resolution is improving. But we're not trying to make you like humans, Dr. Hyunwoo protested. We want you to be the best versions of yourselves. That's what makes your approach so effective, High Counselor Thexamiran said, rising from his kneeling position. You don't seek to dominate or replace. You simply demonstrate that growth is possible, and others choose to follow your example. Engineer Taemin Lee looked thoughtful. So what you're really asking is for us to help you remember how to change and grow. Exactly, said Ambassador Veltar. We became so focused on maintaining perfection that we forgot how to improve. The K human delegation huddled together for a quick discussion. We can't run a galactic civilization, Captain So Young whispered. We barely know what we're doing on Earth. But we can share what we've learned, Young Ho Shin pointed out. And maybe learn from them too. It's not about running anything, Dr. Yoon Ji-yoon added. It's about cultural exchange on a massive scale. Ambassador Dae-hyun turned back to the council. We'll accept, but with conditions. This has to be a partnership, not a hierarchy. You keep governing your own people. We'll just share our experiences and perspectives when asked. And we want to learn from you too, Dr. Hyunwoo added. Human civilization has a lot of problems we haven't solved. Maybe together we can figure out solutions that none of us could find alone. Furthermore, Jae-sung Park said, speaking up, from where he'd been quietly observing, we want this to be a cultural exchange, not just a teaching program. We want to learn your music, your art, your philosophy. We want to understand how different species think about beauty and meaning. The council chamber erupted in approving sounds from dozens of different species. High Counselor Thex Miran raised his hand for silence. Then let it be recorded that this day marks the beginning of the Great Exchange. No longer will the galaxy be governed by the principle of domination. Instead, we choose the path of mutual growth and adaptation. 6 months. Later, the transformation was visible throughout galactic civilization. Earth had become the unofficial capital of the galaxy, not through conquest, but because everyone wanted to come there to study and learn. Universities across the planet were packed with alien students learning human approaches to problem-solving, creativity, and resilience. In return, human students were scattered across the galaxy, studying alien technologies, philosophies, and art forms. Captain So Young Kim stood in the observation deck of the new Galactic Cultural Exchange Center, watching ships from hundreds of worlds arriving and departing from Earth's orbit. Can you believe this all started because we got headaches instead of falling to our knees? She said to Dr. Hyunwoo, who was reviewing applications from young aliens wanting to study human biology. I'm still not sure I understand why they were so impressed, he replied. We just acted like ourselves. That's the point, Dr. Minseo said, joining them at the window. We acted like ourselves instead of like what they expected us to be. And apparently, that was revolutionary. Engineer Tae-Min Lee was working with a mixed team of human and alien engineers on the next generation of interstellar ships. Their designs incorporated human adaptability with alien precision, creating vessels that were both efficient and resilient. The irony, Scholar Inho observed, reviewing the latest reports from across the galaxy, is that we're teaching them to be more like us. But in the process, we're becoming more like them, too. Human society is more organized and efficient than it's ever been. Maybe that's how it's supposed to work, Ambassador Dae-hyun suggested. Maybe the best civilizations are the ones that keep learning from each other instead of trying to stay the same forever. As the sun set over the sprawling campus where beings from across the galaxy worked and learned together, none of the humans fully grasped the magnitude of what had happened. They had accidentally saved galactic civilization by teaching it the most human skill of all, the ability to turn adversity into advantage, challenges into opportunities, and differences into strengths. The galaxy now knelt before Earth not in submission, but in gratitude, and the humans, in their typically modest way, just kept trying to help however they could, because that's what humans did. They adapted, they grew, and they helped others do the same. And it turned out that this simple approach was exactly what the universe had been waiting for all along.